Let's get back to one of our top stories right now. The Syrian peace talks that finally got underway today in Switzerland. But a war of words broke out as the parties to the conflict vented their anger, their hatred, their venom. Looming over the talks, the continuing savagery of this 3-year civil war. And we must warn you that some of these graphics you're about to see are very disturbing.
2 or 3 minutes.
And Bouthaina Shaaban is joining us now from Montreux in Switzerland, just outside of Geneva. She's a senior advisor to the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. I want you to listen to the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, because he made it clear today at the start of these so-called peace talks that there can be no role for Bashar al-Assad in any transitional government, that Bashar al-Assad must simply go away. Listen to John Kerry.
You cannot have peace, you cannot have stability, you cannot restore Syria, you cannot save Syria from disintegration as long as Bashar al-Assad remains in power.
In exchange for peace, is Bashar al-Assad ready to leave office and give up power?
I think you should ask a different question, Wolf. In what right does John Kerry say to Bashar al-Assad, you can't save Syria, you can't stay in Syria? Can we do that to your democratic country, ask your president not to be there and not to save his country and not to be in power? Is it John Kerry who should say that? Or is it up to the Syrian people to decide who should be their president? Isn't it a democracy? Shouldn't it come through the ballot box or through what John Kerry says? Isn't this colonial, what John Kerry said today? To me, it's very colonial.
But are you suggesting that there's real democracy in Syria right now?
Well, do you think there's real democracy in the United States when they deal with countries like this? In Syria, there is a war. There is a horrid terrorism. The Syrian people are suffering a huge deal. There is a lot of bloodshed. But I can say that the interference of countries, namely Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United States, has caused the Syrian people, their institutions, their lives, their security, their peace of mind.
The accusation,
so I think what we need from countries is...
The accusation against your regime, your government, is that more than 100,000 Syrians have been killed, that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, have been placed in exile externally, internally, and that war crimes are being committed. You've seen these awful pictures that have been released in the past few days. Our own Christiane Amanpour showed the world some of these pictures, and this international group is suggesting this is systematic torture, war crimes created by your government. And I want you to respond, because these pictures are awful, and I want our viewers, we'll show the viewers some of these pictures, to be warned, young people should not see these images.
These are not only pictures for me. These are real people who are being killed by terrorists, who are being kidnapped, who are being raped. I have hundreds of stories to tell you about what's happening to my people. But you really have to be in Syria to know who is doing what. One can't be in Washington, Christiane, Amanpour, or in New York, and then decide who is doing what. Remember the chemical? Now, Massachusetts has announced the study that all what has been circulated about the chemical was absolutely unfounded about the Syrian government. We have to acknowledge that there is a huge campaign against the Syrian government for the last 3 years. And the aim is not the Syrian government. The aim is the destruction of Syria, the destruction of the Syrian people for only the benefit of Israel. That is the true story that is happening in Syria.
But these pictures were collected by war crimes prosecutors, forensic experts. A defector from your government came out with all these pictures saying these crimes were committed by Syrian government authorities.
This is simply a huge, huge lie. And remember, it was the 21st of August, the chemical. Now Massachusetts announced the study. Wait for 3 and 4 months, and then you will know the real story. You know, the problem is that the Syrian people have been victims of so many lies circulated in order to justify this horrid war that has affected our lives, affected our country, that horrified our people, that trying to create an ethnic conflict, trying to create a religious conflict in a country that has been a safe haven for refugees throughout its history.
On the chemical weapons, there's negotiations. The U.S., Russia, others have been involved. Are you saying that your government was not involved in creating and storing weapons, chemical weapons?
I'm not saying my government what my government has, what it hasn't. I'm saying my government has never, ever used chemical weapons. Chemical weapons were used by these terrorists, and we know the countries who had been helping them. It is a terrible crime what's happening against the Syrian people, and it is basically through foreign intervention, Saudi, Turkey, and unfortunately with the support of the United States. There's one man in the United States who's misleading the United States about what's happening in Syria, and I think you should stop him. It shouldn't continue like this.
Who's that man? Who are you talking about?
I'm not going to name him. You know him. Everybody knows him.
Everybody knows who? You're talking about the President of the United States, the Secretary of State. What are you suggesting?
Everybody. No, I'm not talking about that level. Everybody knows who is trying to manufacture so-called opposition. Those people who we saw today in the meeting room have not been to Syria for the last 30 years. They have nothing to do with the Syrian people. They do not represent anyone from the Syrian people. I don't know whether they represent some kidnappers or some criminals. I don't know who do they represent. I think you should ask who do they represent. If you take them to the Syrian people and try to ask them to go through elections, I don't think there are 5 people in Syria who would know them or who will elect them.
Are you talking about Syrian opposition leaders, the rebels as they're called? Is that what you're talking about?
The ones we saw inside the room today are not opposition leaders. There is a genuine national opposition inside Syria and outside Syria of people who would not accept this destruction to go on, of people who care about Syria, who care about the country, who care about the people, but unfortunately these people were not invited.
Well, you're now in Geneva together with these opposition leaders. Are you ready to negotiate, to talk to them and try to work some sort of a ceasefire, if you will, or some initial steps to end the bloodshed?
You know, the United Nations said there are over 240 different groups fighting in Syria. The question is, these people, can they stop any of these factions fighting in Syria? They are not opposition leaders. You know, the people who say to you in the United States that these are opposition leaders, they are misleading you. They are not leaders in any sense, neither in a social sense nor in a political sense. But what can we do? We want to solve the problem in our country, and it is an expression of goodwill on the side of the government that we accepted to come to Geneva. But truly, the solution for Syria should be made by the Syrian people inside Syria, not in Geneva.
So what do you hope should emerge from these talks in Geneva right now? Because you're sitting down with these Syrian opposition leaders.
Yeah. Well, what we hope for is that everybody would decide that the interest of Syria, that the interest of the Syrian people should be put above everything. And we hope that countries who are supporting Wahhabi thinking, Wahhabi trends, who are supporting terrorism, will stop supporting it. Wolf, listen to me. Wahhabism is not only a danger to Syria, it's a danger to the entire world. You don't need Osama bin Laden to come next time, you know, or somebody like Osama bin Laden. What we are facing in Syria is a very, very dangerous mentality that is destructive to the modern thinking, to the modern world, to the coexistence, to living together. It is extremely dangerous. The least thing the West can do is to support the Syrian people against this horrible Wahhabi extremist Qaeda thinking.
And when you hear the opposition say that your government, the government of President Bashar al-Assad, is engaged in systematic torture, war crimes, brutality, crimes against humanity, and that they should be charged with these crimes by the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands, what do you say?
My answer to them is, come to Syria, live there, travel there, work there, and you will find out for yourselves who is the criminal, who is kidnapping people, who is raping people, who is, you know, who are gangsters on the roads and in cities and in towns. I mean, it is really, you know, sad to see some Christians here, while Ma'lula, the only place in the world who speaks the language of Christ, was destroyed by these terrorists. 11 nuns are still kidnapped by these terrorists, and yet you see somebody who is a Christian who's supporting these terrorists. This is truly sad. The world should know the real story, Wolf, believe me. All what's circulated in the media, or most of it, to be accurate, most of what's circulated in the media has nothing to do with what's happening in Syria. I've been living there for the last 3 years. You know, of course, I've been living there always, but I have not left Syria during this crisis, and I know exactly what's going on. I love my country, I love my people, I only want what is best for my people. I wouldn't stand here and talk to you unless I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Bouthaina Shaaban is a senior advisor to the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. Bouthaina Shaaban, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf. Lovely to talk to you.